Boa tarde. Em primeiro lugar, gostaria de agradecer a presença de todos aqui. A gente tem mais de 250 pessoas que se inscreveram para participar da aula de hoje, que é a última aula de uma série de 5 aulas sobre a hidrocefalia. Bom, temos aqui o Dr. Maurice Schultz, que participa diretamente da França, onde ele atua como professor da Universidade de Marseille, e o Dr. Sérgio Cavalheiro, que fala diretamente de São Paulo, onde atua como professor titular na Universidade Federal de São Paulo, e onde também é orientador do programa de pós-graduação de neurocirurgia e neurociências. Dr. Sérgio, por favor, deixo a palavra com o senhor. Boa aula.
Ok, Renata, muito obrigado. Gostaria de agradecer a Promedon. Como você falou, esse é o último mini-simpósio, a última aula desse mini-simpósio que nós fizemos no mês passado, todo dedicado à hidrocefalia, e é um grande prazer estar aqui com vocês hoje. Tá? E, bom, je suis très ravi de vous présenter le professeur Maurice Schultz. À mon avis, il est le plus important professeur de neurochirurgie pédiatrique du monde. Il est représenté la formation de plusieurs, il est responsable pour la formation de plusieurs neurochirurgiens pédiatriques du Brésil. Et aussi, il a donné des motivations et des supports pour la création de la Société brésilienne de neurochirurgie pédiatrique. Il était président de la Société internationale de neurochirurgie pédiatrique. Il a publié numérosos papiers, des livres et des chapitres aussi. Mais surtout, il nous a appris à réfléchir sur au propos de la maladie. Et ça, je crois que c'est le plus important. Et aujourd'hui, il va parler des infections de dérivation ventriculo-péritonéales, comment on peut les réduire. C'est le grand final de notre course. S'il vous plaît, professeur Schultz.
Merci beaucoup, Sergio. Muchas gracias, Sergio Caballero, que es un gran amigo. Sergio se fue en Marsella hace más de 30 años y se quedó algunos años con nosotros, y para mí es un gran placer participar a esta reunión en Brasil. Brasil es mi segunda patria, todo el mundo lo sabe. He ido casi 40 veces, más de 40 veces en Brasil, y me gusta mucho venir en este país maravilloso, y sobre todo de hablar de neurocirugía y de neurocirugía pediátrica. Y Sergio ha escogido el tema que me parece el más fundamental para un neurocirujano pediatra, es los shunts, y sobre todo las complicaciones de los shunts. Y pienso que esto es el problema fundamental, porque en cada servicio de neurocirugía pediátrica, no solamente en América del Sur, o en Europa, o en África, o en Asia, son los shunts y los problemas de los shunts. Por tanto, pienso que has escogido el tema más importante de nuestra especialidad. Y quiero hablar de las infecciones de los shunts para decir que esto es el problema mayor de la neurocirugía pediátrica. Shunt infection remains the most important chapter in our pediatric neurosurgical specialty. When we speak about the shunt, everybody speaks about not only mechanical complication, speaks about infection. I think infections are fundamental, and if we see what progress we have done in the management of hydrocephalus, we have this early diagnosis. It's clear now we can make a diagnosis of hydrocephalus in the prenatal period, and Sergio Caballero knows very well this chapter. We know now with new radiological investigation, we can detect exactly what is the level of hydrocephalus, if it is bilateral, what is the importance of hydrocephalus, if this hydrocephalus is acute, chronic, or subacute. We know much better the knowledge of mechanism of hydrocephalus. If the hydrocephalus is coming from the ventricular level, or if it is coming from another level, for example, a spinal problems, spinal tumors, etc., etc. Another great progress we have done is the quality of material. If you see the literature of hydrocephalus, you see that the number of material, ventricular catheter, peritoneal catheter, and especially shunts reservoir are changed drastically in the last 20 years. Consequently, we will see if the quality of material is combined with a diminution of complication in shunt procedure. Also, and I think that is a major problem, the surgical technique of implantation is fundamental. We have done tremendous progress in the surgical technique of implantation. That explains why we have now less shunt complication, not only mechanical complication, but also infection. And I think the relation between surgical technique and shunt complication are very close. And I will try to express to you that what is fundamental is not the quality of material, but is the technique. Technique can change everything, can change the prognosis of hydrocephalus, can change the follow-up of hydrocephalus, and the quality of life after shunt implantation. And also, as you know, there are alternatives to shunts, mainly endoscopy. And endoscopy has made a tremendous change in the prognosis for hydrocephalus, because now more and more hydrocephalus is managed not only by shunts, but is managed by endoscopy. That are all the progress we have done in the recent 20 years in the management of hydrocephalus. What is interesting when we see the complication in modern shunt surgery, what we have seen is due to the technique, due to the expertise of neurosurgeon, due to the sophistication of the material, mechanical complications are less and less important. That is clear in all series. Unfortunately, shunt infection, even in the recent series, even in the most modern neurosurgical department, remains at the same level. And that raises a main problem. Why? Why the shunt infection in all series remains so high? And we will try to explain the reason to see this tremendous challenge in the shunt management. If we see the literature in the recent 10 years, we see that the shunt infection rate remains very high, between 0.7% to 35%. And even in recent series, the infection rate remains near 20 to 30%. It's too high. We cannot accept in a neurosurgical operation, in neurosurgical management, we have this high level of complication. But if we see among all the series in the literature, the average rate of infection is generally considered between 6 to 8%. It's much less than 35, but it's too high. We cannot accept at the present time that during a surgical procedure, we have a 6 to 8% shunt infection rate. That concerns not only late infection, but early infection. Consequently, we will try during this conference how we can diminish this very high infection rate. If we see in the different series between 97 to 10, we see the differences between the procedure, but it's clear that the infection rate remains the major problem. And even in a pediatric neurosurgical department, very sophisticated in Toronto, managed by Jim Drake, in 98, you see the percentage of infection remains too high. And in this paper published in Neurosurgical Focus in 2012, you see that in the very large series of infection, the number of infection remains very important, between 3 to 12% in shunt operation. And if you see the number of patients included in this series, it's unacceptable to see that between 3 to 12% of shunt operation are followed by infection. And in this paper, very important paper, they try to explain different protocols, including perioperative antibiotics. We will see if it is useful or not. Skin preparation, limitation of OR personnel, the operative time, and it's important to see that if we include all these items in the protocol to avoid shunt infection, we have significant good progress. If we consider shunt infection, what is important in this cooperative study, including more than 3,000 patients, what we see is that fever is the most important symptom. If we have fever few days after shunt implantation, it's clear that it's not the etiology is related with your operation. Consequently, that means probably you have a shunt infection. You have, especially in child, is important, irritability, vomiting, and vomiting associated with fever is the most significant symptoms to detect shunt infection. What is interesting to see in this series, abdominal pain. Why is it important? Because in many series of shunt implantation, we have abdominal problems after this implantation. That it can be related with an ascites, related with abdominal cyst, but that means that abdominal pain can be related with shunt infection. And I will try to explain that if you have an abdominal complication after a shunt implantation, probably, not in all cases, probably is related with infection. More rarely, you have drowsiness, headaches, diarrhea, lethargy, and seizure. Seizure is important, but it's not related with shunt infection, because after shunt implantation, you can have a seizure. Consequently, I think the major symptoms are fever, irritability, vomiting, and cutaneous manifestation. That means if you have infection of the skin at the level of the shunt territory. Identification of shunt infection can be done with study of C-reactive protein, CRP. You can detect it in the blood, in the serum, but also in the CSF. And that has been explained in Germany, in the Journal of Neurosurgery. If you have this elevation of C-reactive protein in the blood or in the CSF, that means probably you have a shunt infection. Classification of shunt infection. When we speak about shunt infection, normally everybody speaks about meningitis, but you can have a wound infection. That means at the level of the ventricular catheter, the valve, or at the level of the abdomen, you can have this. That is a clear stigmat of shunt infection. Wound infection at the level of the shunt tract and at the level of infection. And it's why it's so important to make a good management of this skin incision. Very short incision is very important, not only at the level of the cranium, but also at the level of the abdomen. Of course, if you have a shunt infection, it's related CSF infection, not only meningitis, but ventriculitis, as you see here. Here is a ventriculitis, large ventricles. You see the visualization of the ependymal layer. That is a stigmatus of the ventriculitis. It's clear in this case, a MR in the post period of shunt implantation means you have a risk of shunt implantation. You can have the shunt system infected himself with minimal signs of contamination, purulent exudate at the level of the material, or in or out shunt material. And that also is important. Abdominal complication. If you have these problems, I mentioned presently that you can have problems of the level abdominal pain. But if you have this in the tomoecography, that means you have accumulation of CSF at the level of the abdomen. It's a cyst, clear, but in most of the cases, in cooperative studies, it has been mentioned that these abdominal complications are related with a mild or serious shunt infection. Consequently, in this case, we need not only to empty this cyst, but also to remove the material totally. Consequently, here you have the 4 types of shunt infection: wound infection, CSF infection, infected shunt system, and abdominal complication. And that is the typical aspect of ventriculitis without and after contrast. What you see, large ventricles, you see that the ependymal layer is very visible, too visible. That means you have infection of the ependymal layer, and inside you have in this 2 years old shunted patient pus inside the ventricles. That is a ventriculitis related with shunt infection. You can also an intraventricular abscess. Here you see the shunt here. The ventriculars are very large. The brain is near totally destruct. And in the top, at the end of the ventricular catheter, what you have is an abscess. Of course, that is typical, quite rare, abscess of shunt infection. Other examples, in this shunt patient, you have the shunt here, the reservoir here, you have the ventricular catheter here with contrasts, and you see all the ventricles are very large and enhanced ventricular layer. That is a typical aspect of shunt infection. Large ventricles, the shunt is not functioning, and you have infection of the ventricular layer. What are the organisms implicated in the shunt infection? You have several: Staphylococcus species, Coagulase negative, Staphylococcus aureus, but also you can have Streptococcus aureus, Enterococcus germ, corynebacterial is more rare, or gram-negative, quite rare, and in few cases, especially in developed countries, you have Candida sporium. What we need to know is that in 67 to 85% of the cases is the Staphylococcus aureus in most of the cases. That means that infection is a colonization of shunt system at the level of the skin. And CSF shunt acts as a foreign body. That is an argument to say that shunt infection is related with the colonization of the skin by the infection. So it's a close relation between the skin and the shunt. Remain that in between 60 to 80% of the cases is a Staphylococcus aureus. When you have a shunt infection, in most papers, I have detected more than 30 papers talking about the relation between shunt infection and the date of infection. In most of the cases, you see that the occurrence after shunt implantation occur after the first month or during the second to 9th month. That in near all the cases, shunt is under the 10 months after shunt implantation. Late shunt infections are quite rare. And here you see in this paper from Lille in France in 2002, only 12% of all shunt infections are a late infection. In most of the cases, 9 months after shunt implantation. But we can say that, for example, in our series, we have studied late complication at 10 years among more than 1,000 patients. Infection remain only 1.3%. What we need to know that consequently, shunt infection occur immediately after shunt implantation or few weeks or few months after implantation. Consequently, if after a shunt implantation you have a fever and vomitings, consequently you can say that probably you have a shunt implantation. In most of the cases, we have studied in our paper published in the Journal of Neurosurgery, 60% of shunt infection occur within 1 month after surgery, and 80% occur within 6 months after surgery. What is the conclusion of this sentence? That shunt infection is, for us, near in all cases an operative complication. It's what you do during the 20 or to 40 minutes your procedure, you can have a shunt infection. It's an operative complication. It's not related with another infection. That is totally wrong. If you have a shunt infection, many questions arise. I have tried to explain some questions. You can have controversy, of course. Do we need to remove the shunt? Do we need to give antibiotics? What is the reason to have this shunt infection? Many problems related with what we have done or what we need to do. What is the best treatment when we have a shunt infection? The consequences we will speak about, the consequences of shunt infection. The cause, if it is related with your procedure, related with the material, related with the neurosurgeon. But what is the most important problem is prevention. Prevention. Prevention is the most important. To avoid a shunt infection is to prevent it. And this conference is to speak and to stress the problem of prevention. What are the risk factors for shunt infection? The cause, etiology, the clinical condition of the patient, if the patient is infected before or during the procedure, the age, if we have more infection in children or in adults, when you perform the operation, early in the morning, in the day, or in emergency during the night, the duration of shunt-in operation, that is very important, the numbers of persons present in the operative room, if the shunt infection is related with the shunt material, if a previous shunt system is important or not to avoid a shunt infection, the presence of a post-operative CSF leak, and to see if there is a relation between the economical level of the medical centers and shunt infection. That is to express if you have more infection in a poor country or in a rich country, or in an underdeveloped country or in developed country. The cause of hydrocephalus is quite important. And we see that in case of intraventricular hemorrhage, in the old series of Volpe, 45%. You can represent 45% of neonates or newborns with intraventricular hemorrhage with a shunt present infection. In the large series of Boyton, 50% infection rate. In the series of Boop, 13%. Consequently, intraventricular hemorrhage is a major risk to have a shunt infection, but also myelomeningocele. We can explain this because in many cases of myelomeningocele, you have a CSF leakage. That if we try to close the myelomeningocele is to avoid a shunt infection. Consequently, relation with shunt infection and myelomeningocele is clear. And of course, it's evident if you have a meningitis and if you put a shunt, the risk of secondary shunt infection is very important. But have in mind that intraventricular hemorrhage and myelomeningocele are a fantastic cause of shunt infection. Infection remains a very frequent complication in myelomeningocele subject with hydrocephalus. And in this series, you see published in 2004, you see among near 1,000 patients, number of infection remains very important. As you see, near 20%. And the infection rate per procedure, first infection, is 10%. Consequently, that is to be to see very important factor how to put a shunt when you have a child with a myelomeningocele. Because you know, it's not the subject of this conference. If you have a myelomeningocele, in many papers, there is a discussion to know if we need to put a shunt before the shunt closure, at the same time of myelomeningocele closure, or after. In my mind, I don't like to put the shunt at the same time because the patient can be infected. I prefer to put the shunt after the closure because then many times you do a closure and the hydrocephalus can disappear. And here you see in this series, you see that in the infection rate in more than 1,000 cases with myelomeningocele, you see that the significant risk factor is again the myelomeningocele. Another risk factor for shunt infection is the age. Do we have more infection in the pediatric age or in adult patients? And here you see the publication where risk factors is important in all these series. In these two series, there is no risk factor. For us, in our series, there is a high risk limited to premature infants. It's clear that if we put a shunt in a premature patient or in a newborn, the risk of infection remains much higher. Nevertheless, in this series of 2012, you see that among this overall infection rate, children and adults, and per patient, children and adults. What we see clearly that the risk of infection is much more important in children than in adults. We know that the immuno status in children is less important than in adults. Consequently, we must be more careful treating the child with hydrocephalus than an adult with hydrocephalus. In neonates, to avoid this infection, some authors, you see here the list of these authors, recommend intravenous immunoglobulin prophylaxis in infants in order to reduce the shunt infection. We have tried to use this immunoglobulin treatment. We don't see significant differences in the infection rate. I have mentioned that 60% of shunt infection and 80% during the 6 months of therapy. Again, shunt infection remains an operative complication. Consequently, the time of operation is important, the duration of operation is important, and the numbers of persons is important in the OR. Consequently, we need to do this shunt at the beginning of the operating program. If you put a shunt early in the morning, the risk of infection is much lower. If you put a shunt in the afternoon, especially in emergency during the night, the risk of infection is much higher. Sometimes you don't have the choice if it is an emergency. But I remember in a very important department, I give a lecture on shunt infection prevention, and in the afternoon of this pediatric neurosurgical department, a shunt was done in the afternoon. What occurred 2 days after, it was an infection. Consequently, if you are the head of the department, you can make a program of the operation. You can decide to do the operation early in the morning, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. In this case, it's perfect. If you are a resident, you cannot decide what is the time of your shunt schedule. Consequently, that is a major problem. The duration of shunt implantation is fundamental. I am convinced that a shunt can be implanted in 20 to 40 minutes. But that is related to the neurosurgical expertise. If you are a neurosurgeon who knows what is hydrocephalus, who knows what is the type of material, who has done several hundred of shunt implantation, you can reduce the duration of operation. But that is fundamental. And the number of persons in the OR also is very important. And I will speak later on about this. Duration of implantation, fundamental, is related to the expertise of the neurosurgeon. He knows the patient, he knows the age of the patient, he knows the etiology of the hydrocephalus, he knows in what operating room is operating, he knows all the material he has is our disposal, but a shunt must be done in 20 to 40 minutes. If you need more than 1 hour or 2 hours, the risk of infection is much higher. Consequently, that is fundamental. And please try to do a shunt implantation in less than 40 minutes. Fundamental. Number of persons in the operative room. No more than 4 persons. No more than 4 persons. I have learned this when I make my training in pediatric neurosurgery in US. First in New York, in Chicago, and in Toronto. And I was always surprised that 10%, 15% were in the operative room at the time of shunt implantation. For sure, if you have more than 5% to 6% in the OR, the risk of infection is fundamental. You need the neurosurgeon, you need his assistant, you need an anesthetist and a nurse. No more. Why? You don't need a scrub nurse because it's totally unnecessary. For 40 minutes surgery, you don't need a scrub nurse. The material is opened by the assistant and by yourself. What I have seen during my training in US, that all the material is open many times before the beginning of the surgery. And air contamination remains fundamental on the table with all the material. Consequently, the material must be opened at the very last moment, and don't use a scrub nurse, no more than 4 persons to perform a shunt operation. We need to avoid this. That is a curious example for surgery. If you see all these persons, for sure, if you have an hydrocephalus, you will have infection. The dream is this. This slide was given by Concesio Di Rocco. You see, you have the patient and the neurosurgeon. No more. It's a joke, of course. What about the risk factors related with shunt infection? Is shunt material. We have a lot of material, different types of valves, different of connectors, reservoir. Consequently, it's sometimes difficult to choose between all this material. We need to know if this material can be related with a shunt infection. The type of material has little influence, for me, no influence on mechanical complication and on shunt infection. Consequently, for me, if you have very sophisticated material or very normal material, it's the same. Consequently, if you have this material, that means complicated material, sophisticated material, the shunt infection will remain the same. The type of material has no influence at all for me in shunt implantation. Select material before surgery in order not to lose time. You know the severity of hydrocephalus. You know in what size, what level you need to implant the material. Consequently, you know if it is an acute hydrocephalus or a chronic hydrocephalus. Consequently, careful selection of the material before surgery in order not to lose time. Never test a valve. A medium valve remains a medium valve. Low pressure valve, we never use a low pressure valve. We never use a high pressure valve. Consequently, in most of the cases, it's a medium valve. And if you test a valve, the risk of infection is higher, very dangerous. Never test a valve. Also, very important is to open the sterile packaging at the very last moment. When I speak about the very last moment, it's few seconds. It's not 1 hour. It's not a few minutes. It's a few seconds before implantation of the ventricular catheter. Also, that is very important. The type of material is in Fontanelle. All this type, we never use this. That is all material, reservoir, as you see here. Here, ligature, you see this all terrible material, a ligature here, ligature here, ligature here, here and here. That all these details of material are cause of infection. Never use all this ligature. Danger. What you need is one ligature, connection between the ventricular catheter and the valve. You see that the peritoneal catheter now in most of the companies send you this type of material. the peritoneal catheter is attached to the valve. Consequently, you don't need a ligature here. That is the best way to avoid not only a mechanical complication, but a shunt infection is one ligature and no connector. The best way, simplest way. The type of material is not also important. These cooperative studies published in 2004, about 10 centers, you see the infection rate remains quite important, 8.4%. It's not related with the type of valve. Delta, standard valve, sigma valve is not important. You can have infection even with a programmable valve. If you use the programmable valve, you can have an improvement in the mechanical complication, but never related with shunt infection remains important, 8.5% published in 2000. Consequently, again, the quality of material, simple or sophisticated, is not important related with shunt infection rate. Here is an interesting paper published in 2005 in Africa. This was by Benjamin Worf, now he studies in US. He studied in near 200 patients, 2 shunt systems. One Codman Hakim, which cost is $800, and the Shabra shunt, it cost $50. That is in Africa. Consequently, what is important to know that the infection rate related with the different type is exactly the same. Consequently, it's not important, even if you use a very cheap shunt, the Shabra, $45. We promote this at the level of the World Federation in African countries. The infection rate remains exactly the same. What about antibiotics in prenatal shunt catheters? If it is important in the incidence of shunt infection. This was published in 2005. You see that with non-impregnated catheter, shunt infection is 12%. With impregnated catheter is 1.4% infection. Consequently, it seems that in most of the papers, impregnated antibiotic catheter is important. Here you see a more recent paper published in 2009, comparison of shunt infection incidence in high-risk subgroups receiving antibiotic impregnated versus standard shunts. In this paper, it's clear that impregnated antibiotics diminish significantly the shunt infection. More recently, in 2019, as you see here, you see in this English presentation, in a multi-center single-blinded randomized trial and in economic evaluation, what you see that among near 3,000 patients, consequently that is very important, you see that using antibiotic impregnated shunts, the number of shunts is significantly much lower than in the non-impregnated shunt. Consequently, I think this factor, impregnated antibiotic shunt, remains very important. Unfortunately, in many countries, in many centers, is more expensive. And I travel many times in Africa or in South Asian countries. When I speak about antibiotic shunt impregnated, they are reluctant to use this due to the cost of this. Here you see in this publication in 2008, in standard shunt, you see 23% contamination, antibiotic impregnated casein only to 2%. Consequently, it's clear that antibiotic impregnated catheter can be very useful in many centers, and we need to use this. More recently, in 2019, you see this published in The Lancet, antibiotic impregnated shunt could prevent hydrocephalus infection and can save millions of dollars in many countries. Another risk factor is the presence of postoperative CSF leak. If you have before or during surgery this type of leaks, CSF leaks, the risk of infection remains quite important, as you see here. There is a relation between the economical level of the medical centers and infection. I don't think so. I assure you that traveling a lot every year, I have seen neurosurgical centers in Africa, in South America, in South Asia. I am convinced that there is no relation between the economic layer and infection. An example, you see among more than 1,000 cases of VP shunt in Burma, it's not a very rich country, you see the shunt infection is 6.3%. Consequently, it's not more important that in other centers in the average median level of shunt infection. Consequently, there is no clear relation with the economical layer and the shunt infection risk. And what is the most important? I have say that the etiology can be important. I have say that the material is not important, but technique of implantation allows to eliminate or reduce mechanical complication and shunt infection. I am convinced by that since more than 30 years. For example, in the preoperative period, assessment of the patient to see the general condition of the patient, infection. If you have an infection, it's clear. If you have infection during myelomeningocele cell, if you have an infection related with the meningitis, with a ventriculitis, or any kind of infection, or if you have a bad skin condition, don't insert an internal shunt. Insert an external drainage for a few days or few weeks. We don't shave the patient. I think it's not only indispensable, but it can be dangerous. If you shave the patient at the very last moment, not a day before. Because if you shave a patient a day before, you have a risk to injure the skin and to have a small contamination at the level of the skin. And we don't, Sergio Cavallero knows that in our department, we don't shave for any kind of surgery in the last 40 years. And we don't have more infection than we don't shave or shave. Consequently, I think even for shunts, it's not indispensable to shave the patient. A skin preparation is important. If you have a lesion like this, in this case, of course, you know that you need to put your shunt in the other level. If you shave, you shave only at the level of the skin incision, only to have a easier skin condition to close your incision. We don't use antibiotics, and we speak later on about the necessity to give antibiotics before. We don't never give before surgery a prophylactic antibiotic. For us, shaving of the skull is the most probably a risk factor in the prevention of shunt infection. What we do is only we shave at the level of skin incision. You see the skin incision is very small one. You need only 2 to 5 centimeters, no more, like this, like this. Consequently, you don't need to have a large skin flap like this, only small one. I have mentioned this. Premature and infants must be done before older patients, before older patients. Consequently, the duration of implantation, because I am convinced that we can do an operation between 20 to 40 minutes, is related with the age of the patient. It's easier to put a shunt in a child than in adults. It's easier to put a shunt in a newborn than in an old pediatric patient. First implantation or revision. In all series, there is a shunt infection higher if you have a second operation, a revision. And of course, if you have an operative complication during your procedure, if you have an hemorrhage, if you need to enlarge your skin incision. But the most important is the expertise of the neurosurgeon. Expertise of the neurosurgeon means a neurosurgeon who has implanted a lot of shunts before. The American Pediatric Neurosurgical Society has studied 8 years ago the relation between a neurosurgeon who has done 100 operations, a neurosurgeon who has done 1,000 operations. It's a clear differences between a shunt who has an expertise, is familiar with all type of implantation, that a neurosurgeon has done only few operations a year. Again, 4% only, the neurosurgeon, his assistant, the nurse, and the anesthetist. No more. You see, the material, very few, you don't need very more. You see that the table are very close. Consequently, you don't need to move around the table. That is very dangerous. The neurosurgeon and his assistant open themselves all the material. They are very close to select what is the best material. That is in order to avoid to turn around the table. And no scrub, you don't need a scrub nurse to use this material. Also, what is important is to cover the material during all the procedure. You see the silicone tube, as you see here, there is a risk of air contamination during procedure, again, the silicone tube. Consequently, we need to cover all the material during all the procedure, as you see here. We don't see the silicone tube. We don't see the silicone tube. That is also very important and very easy procedure. No touch technique. The material must be used with forceps, not by hands. Never touch the silicone tube. Double gloves, that also is important. It has been studied in many papers in 2006. You see in this paper, it has been shown that a double gloving study has a high incidence of cerebrospinal fluid shunt infection. That is clear. You put one glove at the beginning, and when you open the material, you put another glove in front of the second one. I spoke at the beginning about abdominal complication. You see in this series, abdominal complications are quite frequent or quite rare. But it's important to know that even in our department, 1.7 among 1,700 cases is rare, but arise some problems. I am convinced that abdominal complications are related with a mild or severe shunt infection. Ascites, pseudocyst, bowel perforation, appendicitis, hernia, hydrocele, loss of catheters. Loss of catheter is not related with shunt infection, of course, but this cyst is related with a shunt infection, as you see here. I have shown this before, that before. Infection is the main cause of this abdominal complication. Consequently, we need to change the peritoneal drain positioning with laparoscopy versus laparotomy. In most of the cases, laparoscopy is enough. What we do in most of the cases, we remove the material, we put an external drainage, or sometimes a ventriculo-atrial shunt. But in all these cases, since we are convinced that abdominal complications are related with infection, I prefer to remove the material, to put an external drainage for few days, few weeks, and at the end, another ventriculo-peritoneal shunt. What about antibiotics related with shunt infection? We don't give antibiotics before implantation. In 1995, we have a big meeting in our department with infectiologists, with anesthesists, with neurosurgeons, and we discuss this. Our epidemiology staff say it's totally unnecessary to give antibiotics before implantation. It's not useful. We don't give implantation after surgery. It's totally unnecessary. But since we have a very low infection rate, during anesthetic induction, during surgery, we give one intravenous injection of kefandol, cephanendol, 50 milligrams per kilo during the procedure. I am not convinced that is fundamental or is indispensable, but since we have a very low infection rate, we prefer to continue in this protocol, giving one intravenous injection during anesthetic induction. That means during the 40 minutes, 1 hour implantation. I don't think it's important to put the shunt material in a bath of antibiotics before implantation. I don't think it's important. We don't use this routinely. If we have a shunt infection, we need to remove the material. That is clear. All the material, the ventricular catheter, the valve, the peritoneal catheter. We insert an external drainage, as you see here. We give intravenous antibiotics. After 3 sterile CSF culture, we replace a ventriculoperitoneal shunt in the contralateral size. The total hospital stays is in average 13 to 20 days. That is what is our protocol if we have a shunt infection. That is we do external drainage in this case. Frontal external drainage, occipital external drainage. In case of shunt infection with ventriculitis, like this, or this, we don't recommend intraventricular antibiotics. I know that in several protocols, they like to inject antibiotics inside the ventricles. I don't like this. The epidemiologists, the pathologists have shown that if you inject antibiotics inside the ventricles, we destruct the ependymal layer and we can have problems after that. Consequently, in this case, you see the ventriculitis. We don't like to give intraventricular antibiotics, and I see antibiotics general are enough. Here you see the antibiotic can be used in most of the series. Vancomycin, as you see here, the most important one. In some controversial papers, shunt infection can be best managed medically without removal. I am against this. We cannot treat shunt infection only medically. We need to remove the material totally. Few words about external ventricular drainage. When we speak about ventricular drainage in the conference, and Sergio Cavallero knows this very well, the main problems are this: infection and cost. But the main problem is infection. In many papers, in many centers, when I speak about external drainage, the person says, no external drainage. In our department, the risk of infection is too important. Consequently, if you see in this cooperative study published by Aschoff in Germany, among 8,000 external ventricular drainage in the literature, you see the number of infection, 6.7%. It's exactly the same infection level that we see in the internal drainage. Consequently, if you use the same protocol, here is our infection rate in external drainage in our department, 3.2%, very low. Consequently, it's clear that there is a protocol to prevent external ventricular drainage that has been published in 2013. Here you see that a good protocol, using the same protocol that we use for internal drainage, we can reduce the infection rate. Consequently, external drainage must be done in the operating room, never in the intensive care unit. We follow the same protocol as for VP shunt. The management must be done by neurosurgeon during the following days, not by the nurses, and we change the material after 2 weeks. That all the material, even if you don't have infection. Consequently, if you have a shunt infection, you can raise mortality, morbidity, and the cost. Everybody knows this. And the mortality is important. It has been shown in several departments. Normally, the mortality for shunt implantation is near 0, but if you have infection, you see the mortality rate is greater than 30%, and that was published in 2004. You can have morbidity, as you see, if you have a post-MR after shunt implantation, ventriculitis, etc., psychomotor retardation, neurological impairment, intellectual deficit, visual problems, and seizure after infection. After this type of infection, if you have, for example, isolated fourth ventricle, major problems after infection. You have the push into the material. Epilepsy has been studied in many departments. In our personal experience, shunt malfunction, especially in shunt infection, induce significantly epileptic seizure during follow-up. Consequently, it's a major complication, mortality and the costs. At the end, I need to stress the cost of infection. It has been studied in many centers. It costs, for example, in US, $2 billion every year for shunt infection. Consequently, the cost of infection is fundamental. Shunt infection in '95 cost $30,000 US. Avoiding a shunt infection is equivalent to 50 standard shunts or 15 high-technique shunts. Consequently, you can imagine the relation with shunt infection and the cost of the hospital year of the child with an hydrocephalus if he has a shunt infection. And here you see in this study published in 2010, 2011, the cost in US is $2 billion if you have a shunt infection. Consequently, it's a major problems in many countries. Consequently, again, shunt infection is an operative complication. It's why we changed totally our protocol. Before 1983, you see that our infection rate was 9.6%. Per procedure, 3.5%. Very high. We changed our protocol in 1983. And what we have seen, the shunt infection at the present time, among more than 3,000 children, per patient is 1.9%, per procedure 1.3%. Consequently, it's possible to reduce near zero the shunt infection problems. That is fundamental. It has been published in Journal of Neurosurgery in 92, and it's curious that in most of the papers dedicated to the shunt are dedicated to shunt material. Very few papers on technique. It seems that shunt complication and especially infection are a fatality and part of the shunt procedure. We cannot accept this, and I have demonstrated before that we can be near 0% of shunt infection with a good technique. Consequently, in conclusion, limited persons in the operative room, no touch technique, double gloves, experienced surgeon, the duration of procedure, and prophylactic antibiotic. That means during surgery, during the procedure, not the day before, a day after. No. It's during the procedure. And with all these major details, we can avoid shunt infection. And when we speak about prevention of shunt infection, what is the most important is the surgical technique. It's not the material, it's not the etiology, it's not what happens in the operating theater or the timing of the patient. Expertise of operation is related with surgical technique, and antibiotic can be useful in some cases. And when we speak about modern management of hydrocephalus, it's clear we have less indication of shunts. We have less expensive shunts, that is clear. Endoscopic can avoid shunt in most of the cases. External shunt, transitory shunt, we know that in some cases, for example, if we have a tumor, we put a shunt, it can be removed after. Even in case of myelomeningocele, we have removed a shunt after the closure. Management of etiology is important, and we have less complication in shunt and less infected shunts. Shunt infection is not a fatality. That is, I am convinced by that. And a last slide that has been published in a journal of neurosurgery recently. A mother said, a person say, I have a VP shunt. I am worried it breaks during COVID-19. Will I be more likely to get a shunt infection? We can say to the family, no. He has a COVID-19. The risk of shunt infection is not more important. Thank you. Thank you, Sergio, for having organized this course on shunt infection. Sergio, for that.
Thank you very much, Professor Schultz, for this wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Several details of this infection. I am convinced it's a surgical problem of the shunt infection. But Professor Schultz, before to finish, you have a few questions of the people. One of them, you have some importance, you give some importance for the protein in CSF. How do you think about when you put in an external ventricular drainage after infection, you control the protein, how the level to implant a shunt, you don't pay attention with this protein level in CSF?
It's an interesting question because in some papers, in some meetings, they said if you have a high level of protein, you cannot put a shunt. The risk of obstruction is important. For me, I think it's not important. the level is not important. If you have 1 gram, 2 grams, 1 gram 5, it's not important. But if you have a high level of protein after shunt implantation, the risk of infection can be important. That is clear. But if you have before a high level of protein, it's not an obstacle or contraindication to insert a shunt. I will be interested to know your opinion, Sergio.
Okay.
What do you think about this?
I am worried because sometimes when you have the cytology, the number of cells is low, but the protein is continue high. Sometimes you have a fungi infection. You need to pay attention. Sometimes you put the shunt, broke again. In the end, you can find a fungi infection. So normally, I don't like to put a shunt with a high level of protein. I'm very worried about that.
If you have a very high level, you are right. Sometimes what is interesting, in the first sample, you have high level of protein, but you don't have germs. And 2 days after, 3 days after, you have a germ. That means you're right. High level can be the first initial sign of infection.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay. But another question of the Dr. Patricia is an assistant. Should like to know about how can you control the subdural chronic hematoma after shunt?
In most of the cases, that if you have a subdural collection after a shunt implantation, that means you have insert probably a too low pressure valve. I never use a low pressure valve. I always use a medium pressure valve. Mm-hmm. In newborn, or even if you have a very large ventricles, the risk of subdural collection remains very important. Mm-hmm. What always I recommend is to put a child who has been operated for a shunt in a contralateral position, that is clear, but also in this position, not like this. Never in the sitting position during 3 weeks, never. Always in prone position, or even in the head, maybe low position. Never like this. That is very important. And sometimes the family disagree. The mother disagree because they want to give food or the milk for the child. They put the child in this position. Is very dangerous. To avoid the subdural collection, always put the child like this for 2 weeks.
And I think the last question is Dr. Angelo Massetti. He'd like to know about if there is difference between the catheter with antibiotic as a Bactiseal and the silver catheter. If you have some experience with silver catheter and you think there is some difference to avoid infection.
No. I don't think there is a difference. That is clear that impregnated antibiotics is useful. I don't know if you use routinely. In your department, Sergio, you use antibiotics catheter or not?
It's very expensive here in São Paulo, and normally when you have a very complicated case, after some infection, sometimes you put impregnated catheter, some long time is EVG, I put impregnated catheter, but unfortunately it's not routinely, because sometimes you need to put in the refrigerator, and sometimes arrive outside the refrigerator. It's a little bit complicated and it's very expensive. So I use in a very few cases, unfortunately. But as you show, the literature show you decrease the number of infection. But
I totally agree with this. When I give a lecture on this, I always say I don't use routinely antibiotic impregnated shunt, because as you know, I give lecture in many papers in many countries like Africa. If you recommend antibiotic impregnated shunt in Africa, they said, no, forget it. No. no. Consequently, in very special case, in case of meningitis, for example, sometimes in case of infected myelomeningocele, yes, you can use it. But I don't use antibiotics in protected material routinely. I agree with that.
Okay. Professor Schultz, there is another question. If you have time, I'm so sorry, but there's several questions. Dr. Adriana Leite, you don't like it to do in the same time in myelomeningocele to put the shunt in the same time. How long do you wait to put a shunt after myelomeningocele?
Normally, if we have a large hydrocephalus, we close the myelomeningocele, and we have seen in a few cases the diminution of the size of the ventricles. Sometimes it's very surprising. You close the myelomeningocele, you wait 1 week, 2 weeks, and you have the surprise to see that the ventricles are less important. And I have few cases, the hydrocephalus is diminishing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't disappear. Hydrocephalus never disappear, but the size of the ventricles disappear, and I wait. And with Scavarda, my successor, we have published an interesting paper. We see that after closure of myelomeningocele, in few cases, you don't need any more to put a shunt.
Yes.
Consequently, it's interesting to know that.
Mm-hmm. But I promise, the last question. What is your opinion about the brainwashing for ventriculitis?
Pardon, excuse me, repeat.
Brainwashing, to put the endoscopy and do a lavage of the brain in cases of ventriculitis.
It can be useful, of course. Of course, it can be used. The problem is to know what you do after. You remove the pus, you remove all the sediments you have into the ventricles, but after you need to put a shunt or to put external drainage. What you do?
Normally you need to put external drainage because you need a long time of antibiotics. In your opinion, is decreasing the days of the hospitalization. So you remove a lot of the pus, you decrease the CSF became more clean, but you decrease the days of the antibiotic and the days of hospitalization. It's the same when you have a premature intraventricular hemorrhage and do a brainwash and decrease the numbers of the day to control.
Bom, gente, muito obrigada. Um abraço a todos. Até a próxima.